damn, I love this sentence. And here's another one, 2 in a row. Can I make it 3? Because there's something about the rhythm of the sentence, or there's something about the imagery of the sentence, or there's something about the metaphor in the sentence that is alive. And I know this is a cheap trick, but it's another cheap trick to keep in mind, and that is the simple old carrot and stick game. At a certain point, if you keep asking yourself, what am I really trying to say? You kind of know. In other words, you're going to get to an outcome. Your last page, your last paragraph, whatever. You kind of know where you're going. But you know what? You don't want your reader to get there before. You want to lead your reader there, and you want to tease your reader there, even though you know how it's going to end. It's really helpful if you know how it's going to end, by the way. I think most narratives that I've written, they begin at the end. If my, call it epiphany or whatever, is this moment, then it's easy, because all I have to do is invent all this stuff to get them there. And you want to get them there a little at a time and tease them there.
The squiggle sentences are terribly subjective.
Yeah. You have to ask yourself, is it alive or is it dead? Do I like it or don't I like it?
And do you have to ask yourself, will the reader like it?
I think you have to ask yourself first, do I really like it? And then you start becoming reader conscious, And I suppose, how you deal with that has in part to do with your sense of how much you care about your group or your community or the public that you're trying to deal with. I mean, can you identify with them? Yeah, a lot of really narcissistic writing, they don't ask themselves that. Do I like it? I'm a piece of shit if anybody else likes it. So how many of you have read poems? You have no idea what they're about.
Yeah.
They're writing to themselves. How many of you are writing prose narratives?
I have a little one, but I'm not generally writing. I just did this for tonight. I'm not a writer, but.
Karen, are you writing fiction? Or?
I'm not writing anything.
You're not writing anything. You're just listening.
This looks like a lot of prose over here.
It's a fiction story, actually. I'm not sure if you could call it prose. The prose I've read is from advanced placement literature classes at Spring Grove, and that's really in depth. But this is kind of just fiction for a class I took online recently.
Don't say just fiction. Because, works like the Divine Comedy, Homer's Odyssey and Iliad, Milton's Paradise Lost, just fiction. And the Bible. Getting in trouble here?
I don't know. Keep going.
It's fiction. The question is it good fiction? Is it fiction? Is it good fiction? That's the question. Is it fiction worth keeping alive, and is it a fiction worth living up to, or making something of, or is it just another?
You define good fiction by something that sounds really real. You read some authors and you swear you lived it, but it's all fiction. Is that good fiction?
Well, it seems to me that, if there are epiphanies communicated that are legitimate, incredible, and original, and interesting, and who cares if, what you make up around it to communicate the truth? And that's my sense of it. But, I'm pretty judgmental about that. I think people need to make judgments. There's bad fiction. It sells well. Video games are fictions. Are they worth it? Or do they do enormous damage? I think we know the answer to that. They're hurting us.
Well, some people might have talked about Socrates leading the youth astray at one time, and different times. I mean, what we need is artists getting into. People are conscious of some purpose moving into video games, taking over that medium, and creating a way for youth to develop in a manner similar to the written word. Obviously, there are certain reflective qualities of reading a book, or there's a certain amount of reflection involved in reading a book that is going to be hard to replicate in video games. But I think sometimes we've got to, rather than, I don't find it's going to be effective, at least with my kids, to say, video games, I didn't play them when I was a kid, and look how good I turned out. All your friends are playing video games, and they're all a bunch of hooligans. I don't think that's going to work with my kids.
It might. They're gonna kick and scream. I kicked and screamed back with my 16-year-old. He doesn't do video games. I also try to use persuasion. Look at that, they're just killing each other. They're just trying to get you in the army. It's just training. They're just trying to sucker you into wearing a uniform and being dead meat. So Coca-Cola can sell Coca-Cola. I mean, this is all very prejudiced, I know. It's also true.
We did an interesting, at least Jim and I think it was interesting thing with our kids when they were growing up. We had one who was 6 and one who was 11, I think, when we did it.
Yeah, that's about right.
We took the TV sets out of the house. We had 3 of them. And we had rules about how you could use the TV, and they didn't choose to follow the rules, so we took the TV sets out, and for 10 years we didn't have any TV. And they would go to school and their friends would all be talking about what they had watched the night before, the programs that they had watched the night before. Our kids didn't have a clue what was going on because they didn't have TV. But you know what? One of those kids turned out to be a voracious reader. One didn't, and I know that if we'd had TV, there wouldn't have been that amount of reading by that child. Mm-hmm. And I think the same could happen with video games. I think parents could just say, not in our house.
Yeah. I get in trouble with my wife.
Well, in some ways you do have to make a space for the reflection to happen. And when you're so busy with video games and running from one thing to another, there's no space for, the pause and the thinking that you want to, you want your children to, you want yourself to have time to do.
Yeah, I don't know if many of you ever read anything that Marshall McLuhan wrote. Mm-hmm. In the famous passage, the medium is the message. Mm-hmm. And you have to wonder about any medium, be it fiction or scientific monographs, crustaceans or whatever. To what extent that shapes the sensibility. And what I see is an acceleration of speed and an acceleration of stimulation in violence. Because the only way you can stimulate is to keep hyping the violence up. And probably it's just inherent almost in the medium. And I think that gives you insensitivity, really. You know, it desensitizes. It really fictionalizes all the killing.
There was a cartoon in last week's paper about some veteran, and his friends were saying, "Oh, he managed to survive Anzio without any psychological problem, but when he watched his great-grandsons playing video games, he hasn't been the same since."
My son, well, he just came back from Afghanistan. He's in Iraq, but that's his favorite, is to play those military games. And it's like, don't you just get enough of it, you know? But that's his thing, and I don't know. I don't understand it.
Well, there's a certain tempo and stimulation required, I think, you know, and that's why they have to get faster and more violent, because you just need the hit. Slow is, you know, if you ask people, what do you value, fast or slow? How many people would almost immediately say fast is better than slow? You know, fast car or slow? Fast car. You want fast internet or slow internet? You want to run fast or walk slow? Everyone wants to go fast. It's just a value that. And of course, there are all kinds of values in going slow. Go slow, you walk, you can actually maybe smell the dirt, you know, or the flowers or whatever, and you can see things in a completely different way. And that's part of being a writer, I think, is like, you have to be slow enough to be a good writer. And reading is slow. And I wonder about these videos, whether the pace is such that reading becomes really hard because it is so slow. And
It's boring.
it's boring. The other problem has to do with the translation in a way. When a video, TV, movie, whatever, is out there and projected on the screen, the image is given. When it's on the page, when it says, you know, my love is a red, red rose, metaphor, you have to translate the language into pictures. And the brain is activated in a way that it doesn't have to be when it's receiving the images. So does that create a passivity in people in general, if that's in a sense what they're growing up on? And if that's the case, do they need increasing doses of stimulation, you know, to satisfy their sense that they're alive?
So if you would read or listen to a what do you call them? On a CD or something.
Audible book?
Yeah. That would stimulate you more, wouldn't it? Just because you're not reading it, your mind would be able to.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So do kids not, I hadn't thought of this before, but as a little kid, junior high, I walked a mile to school and a mile back, and I daydreamed all the time and doing chores. I was a real daydreamer. Kids maybe don't do that so much now. It could be because they have all this speed and everything going on. They don't need to, maybe. I don't know if they do or not, but.
Well, they're dreams, a lot of which resemble nightmares to me. I mean, just kind of look at the ads on TV for movies and video games that are coming out. It's all pretty grotesque stuff. lot of those dreams are manufactured for them. And I suppose, it goes in and affects the dreaming that they do.
Well, one of my daydreams are all great. I mean, I didn't have any bad ones. You made it fun.
What's her name? What's her name?
What's her name? Karen.
Karen, right?
What else could I say? No. And actually, this was before puberty. It wasn't even. It was just dreams about horses and things on the farm and all that. But it was fun, occupied your mind and so forth.
Do you daydream as much nowadays?
I do some, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, when I'm working. Oh, no, I sing more now when I'm working. But no, not as much as a child, I'm sure.
Do you daydream?
At different times, I daydream, but it correlates with how much sleep I have and how much other.
You have 2 young kids, right?
Three, but 2 really young ones.
Difference.
Yeah.
What do you do for a living?
Well, I work here and try to piece things together, but we're doing genetic genealogy here, so that's the area I want to focus in if we succeed enough to allow for division of labor. So that's what I'm doing. It's really interesting to me because I can see, like, we'll take your chromosome and we'll break it down into you're Italian, and you can subdivide into Tuscany or whatever it is, and you can see all your relatives in Italy, and then you can go visit them, or at least your relatives who have taken the test, which would be about 60, 70 people. I guess since you were second generation, you might have about 100 relatives in Italy that would be identifiable using the genetic test.
Easily.
That have already taken the test, I'm saying. It'll grow as more people take the test.
Okay, can we stop there for just a minute?
Yep.
Because she's done, I think you've done some really important things very well.
Thanks.
You have started with a big question mark. You've provided the carrot, and the question: Are they real? And no, they're not real. Blah, blah, blah. You're kind of setting up the problem, and then you've done a nice job of very swiftly giving us what I would call exposition. Who all is involved? Who are these people? And you've, with very, very swift brushstrokes, given us their names, and really what types they are. And you have an interesting dynamic of types, which are credible. I forget exactly each of them, but one's like the queen and the other, blah, blah, blah. So there's interesting possibility for collision and contrast and conflict, etc. And so there's a lot of energy right at the beginning there.
Kind of grabs you.
It grabs you, yeah, it grabs you. But it grabs you while it gives you basic information. Basic information that you need in order to go on with your story.
And the conversation is authentic. It's authentic teenage conversation.
Yeah. It's about movies and reality. It would be interesting to see. I have the feeling that we have dream coming true here, nightmare coming true. You've created a tone so far up to the signs of pretty serious kind of tone, and we're all getting a little creeped out, etc. And then you introduce a humorous note, okay? So this is a complication, a tonal complication. It'll be interesting to see where you go with it. Good. You hear it? You see how she's out of herself in a way that she's inventing this reality. So you are inventing this town in a way. and it's taking on a credible life of its own. Jordan? Question. Answer. You're doing, I think, a wonderful job of creating suspense. Because what you do is you keep giving us more unknowns. As we learn more and more, we learn bigger and bigger nothings. And that's the carrot and stick. It's vital to any narrative hook, keeping the reader engaged. Okay? I have a harder question for you. What's the story? Let me ask you this, why do you want to write it?
I've always wanted to try to write a mystery. Like, I was always fascinated with them.
Why?
And I don't know, it's just like the suspense and like all the clues that like fit it together, and then the reader has to try and like figure it out for himself, and then at the end like all is revealed, and I don't know, it just fascinates me.
So, in a mystery, what's interesting is the process of discovering knowledge,
Yeah.
piecing together information so that you find out something.
Yeah.
What do you want the reader to find out?
Well, mostly they find out that the werewolf is not real. It's actually someone in costume, like trying to scare away people so they can smuggle money.
So the important outcome, in a way, is disillusionment. What your reader is going to come to know is that werewolves are not real. Why is that an important story to tell?
Well, there's a lot of legends and like myths around, about like people seeing like werewolves. I don't like believe in all those monsters.
Do you think there's a whole bunch of suckers out there?
Well,
Do you go to school with a bunch of really gullible people?
sometimes, yeah. One of my friends is really gullible.
Would your story serve them well if you exposed the anatomy of gullibility?
Probably. I guess so.
See, you can write a cheap mystery, or you can write a meaningful mystery. If you put in front of yourself, if you really ask yourself, what's important about my story? Humanly important, or socially important, or whatever. And you went back and you looked at the passages of dialogue that you have, and it's good. I think it's good dialogue. I think you would change it.